Good morning, and welcome to the first Existentialist Congregation of Atlanta's virtual celebration of life. My name is Jan Lister, and I will be your facilitator today. We are a philosophically based spiritual community dedicated to human liberation and founded on existentialist and feminist principles. By existentialist principles, we mean that we are what we do in the world, and we accept responsibility for our choices and our actions. By feminist principles, we mean that we accept and actively support freedom and justice for every person. We support diversity as a source of strength, and we actively include everyone. We make our spiritual home in the Old Stone Church, which was hand-built 100 years ago by the African-American Antioch East Baptist Church. We honor their labors of love and the powerful history of this special place. And we acknowledge that our spiritual home stands on land forcibly taken from the Muskogee Creek people, and we support justice and equality for all Indigenous people. We're going to start off with a song from the First Eat Street Band with Gene Heydrich, Craig Refuse, and Andy Weiskopf. And the choir is Robert Stewart, Carol Harder, and Mary Howard. Thank you guys for that wonderful rendition of that familiar tune. In the United States, LGBTQ History Month is celebrated in October to coincide with National Coming Out Day on October 11th and to commemorate the first and second marches on Washington in 1979 and 1987 for LGBTQ rights. October is also the month we celebrate Gay Pride in Atlanta with an annual festival and a parade. A year ago, for the first time in almost 50 years, Gay Pride festivities in Atlanta were canceled due to COVID-19. And though we were a little sad about it, we knew it was really the only thing to do under the circumstances. And I'm pretty sure most people were thinking, that's okay. Just wait till next year. Well, who knew that next year would come and go with another festival being canceled? I really hope this doesn't happen 3 years in a row, so come on, anti-vaxxers, step up. Anyway, here we are. Fortunately for us, however, even if we can't go to the festivities, we can hopefully bring some of the spirit of those festivities to you. Our speaker today was at the forefront of the gay pride movement in Atlanta 50 years ago, and still is today. Since October 1971, Dave Hayward has aided and abetted every Atlanta Pride event, one of the core collective producing Atlanta Pride in 1972, the first Pride march in the streets. Dave is honored to be thrown out of 2 gay bars for promoting Pride. And I believe that's because he was fighting for the rights of African American and women and lesbians. So he can correct me if I'm wrong on that. From 1977 to 1979, he and his former partner Greg James anchored Gay Digest on Radio Free Georgia, and they produced Atlanta and Georgia's first 2 LGBTQ film festivals in 1979 under the auspices of the newly formed Atlanta Gay and Lesbian Center. Primarily, Dave's mania for social justice expresses in his writing, and he has published in local, regional, national, and international media, including The Advocate, Out Magazine, Canada's LGBTQ magazine Frontiers, and most recently in Georgia Voice, where he reveals our LGBTQ roots and pens tributes to pioneers, pathfinders, and trailblazers. In 2002, Dave founded Touching Up Our Roots for sharing Georgia's long march to freedom for full human and civil rights for all LGBTQ people and their allies. In 2015, he created our founding Valentines with Atlanta Pride to recognize community icons. In 2016, Dave became one of Atlanta Pride's Grand Marshals, and he initiated the LGBTQ Story Tour with Pride and with the LGBTQ Institute at the Center for Civil and Human Rights. We're very happy to have Dave here today to share with us some of his experiences from the past 50 years.
So this is a picture from the 1972 Pride, taken by professional photographer Boyd Lewis. He always wants us to say that. And as you can see, it is a march in the streets. So it was the first Pride march in the streets, because the first Pride they had here in 1971 was refused a permit to march in the street. So they finally did get one for 72. I was part of the core collective that produced the 1972 Atlanta Pride. And as you can see, there's a man and woman who actually were bisexual married couple, Phil Lambert and Judy Lambert, who led the march. And Judy was the co-chair of the Georgia Gay Liberation Front. And then also John Gill is here, who was the minister of the Metropolitan Community Church, which had just started in January of 1972. And he marched in the march also, but not too many members of the church marched. Yes, a Pride March was considered controversial in 1972, but he marched with us, so, okay. And then this is another picture from 1972. And as you can see, this is 14th Street and Colony Square is being built. The person leading the march, along with Judy Lambert and Phil Lambert, was Bill Smith. And he was the co-chair of the Georgia Gay Liberation Front. And I think the rain is right there. I'm not sure. And there's 7. Yeah, so anyway, okay, so that's 1972. And then it's interesting when you talk about all this, because there was an interview that the drag queen Charlie Brown did with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and said that people in drag were not welcome. Not true. This is a picture from 1972 of a float and this beautiful drag queen float that was in the march. So everyone has always been welcome under Pride. People didn't necessarily show up, but in this case, so we did have trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary folks. This is just a gorgeous picture too. I love the layout of it. So, okay, 1972. And then, as you mentioned, Bill Smith, he was the co-chair of the Georgia Gay Liberation Front, and he was one of the founders of Atlanta Pride, and really helped make all that happen, along with several other people. And sadly, he died of a drug overdose in 1980. But we sort of call him the George Washington of the LGBTQ movement here, because he was really the prime mover and shaker and led the marches and all that kind of thing. And then someone who actually has been largely forgotten is Severin, Atlanta native, whose real name was Paul Dolan. And this is a picture of Severin at the 1972 Republican National Convention in Miami Beach. And the thing that's fascinating to me about stories is that this ended up being featured in the 1994 exhibit for the 25th anniversary of Pride at the Seagrams building in New York City. And when you walked into the photo exhibit, it said unknown protester. And I ran up to them and I said, that's not unknown, that's Severin, that's Paul Dolan from Atlanta. But I think what is wonderful about this picture is it really captures him, his ebullience, his energy. And he was a main leader in Pride, and performed for benefits, and really was the first non-binary, gender non-conforming trans leader in the movement. I don't know if he would actually be trans today, but he was definitely radical and progressive. And sadly, Severin died of AIDS in the 1990s. So, okay. We had our first National March on Washington in 1979. This is a scene from DC. And all of us who were organizers helped the 79 National March happen. Atlanta was the southeast hub of it. So that's a picture of the march. And then prominent Atlanta people who were part of the march were Ray Kluka, Eva Salzer, my former partner Greg James, and James Moody. And this is them at the March in Washington. Ray Kluka, there's a park named for Ray Kluka now at Monroe Drive and Greenwood Avenue. And he and John Howell, as far as we know, the only two openly gay men who have public spaces, parks named for them in Georgia. So that's an honor. Ray passed away in 1989, so it's 10 years earlier. Okay, and then more folks from the march. Ray Kluka, Greg James, James Moody, Bob Walters, and myself. And who would know? Many years ago, 1979. And then, what year was this? This is one of the protests. I'm not sure what year it was, but here's Lorraine Fontana. So many years ago.
Say that again.
This is a gay liberation.
Who is in the picture?
Lorraine Fontana.
And can you tilt it a little bit more?
A little more.
Yeah.
Is that good?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And also at the 1979 National March on Washington was Maria Elena Dolan and Liz Hill. And they are still activists today. And she's wearing her Defiant Dyke t-shirt. Maria actually co-hosts the LGBTQ story tour with me. And we lead it together and do the whole patter together and we haven't been able to do that last 2 years in person. So we're doing an online virtual version of it. And she's part of that, part of the narration. So, Killer Dyke. This was my 15 minutes of fame, as Andy Warhol says. I've been part of every Pride here since 1972. And I was marching in the 1976 Pride. And the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and all their incredible wisdom, decided this would be the one picture that they would run of the entire march. It was maybe about 1,000 people in 1976. So I was holding the sign, better blatant than latent. And the caption was, "Marching makes his views known." Better blatant than latent. And the thing that was funny about it is, with media, you never know. Because then the LGBTQ newspaper in North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, picked it up, the Free Press, and all of a sudden I was like a poster boy on the front cover. So there you have it. And then we had a reunion at the Olympics. I've shown you a picture of Greg James already. So this is Greg James and our friend Elizabeth Monahan, who's the wife actually of Eva Salza in the other picture, and myself in the 1996 Olympics here. And I like the T-shirt "Action Equals Life," which was from ACT UP. So this is a picture of Bo Boykin, and he, along with Bill Smith and Severin and a whole bunch of us, were some of the founders of the LGBTQ movement here. The Georgia Gay Liberation Front. And he passed away in 2018. And he did tell me before he passed away that he and the late Shelby Cullum, through the 1960s, formed the Georgia Mattachine Society. And so even back in the 60s, they were going down to City Hall and to the state capitol and delivering written petitions on behalf of LGBTQ rights, which I really didn't know until I talked to him shortly before he passed. So that's something that, again, people kind of know Burl, but they've totally forgotten about Shelby. And Shelby was from an old Atlanta family, and it was quite the scandal that he was an openly gay activist. We're talking about the 60s. But he and Shelby, I guess that was Georgia's first LGBTQ organization, the Georgia Mattachine Society. So the fact that they did that is great, and also what we kind of do with the project is calling out folks like Burl Boykin, Severin, Bill Smith, Shelby Cullum, who might otherwise be forgotten. I'm Dave Hayward, and I wanted to start the presentation, and first thanks to you all for doing this. Sometimes it can be hard to get the attention that must be paid to our movement and our origins. I don't know if people are familiar with, there's an LGBT Institute at the National Center for Civil and Human Rights downtown. And after the Center for Civil and Human Rights opened, they established the LGBTQ Institute there. And they opened on September 2nd, 2015. And I helped them do their opening exhibition, which was a story of the LGBT movement here from the 60s on. So I want to read what I wrote, and I think that it provides a good context for our overall conversation. What a long and strange journey it all is. The success of the LGBT rights movement may now seem meteoric, but almost every increment forward was excruciating. In the Deep South and the bosom of the Bible Belt, the LGBT march towards freedom is unique, even as Atlanta itself is unique. Well, Atlanta was and is a mecca for all kinds of alienated people. LGBT rights and freedoms flourish today after condemnation from the pulpit and from social conservatism at large. In a way, the movement here brought the Bible Belt out of bondage to gender-conforming norms, now archaic, hopefully. Pity the poor zealots. For the millennials, the debate over LGBT rights seems to be a debate no more. Simultaneously, the timeline we created shows how much division and turmoil went on within the LGBT community over gender and race, and over overt protest. When gay bars in 1972 threw out the proponents promoting Pride. When the Pride marches passed without major incident, it was clear that LGBT rights spoke to another Atlanta tradition of fomenting human and civil rights and making social justice happen. In truth, being the city too busy to hate, and the crucible of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights struggle. Here opponents wrap themselves in sanctimony, calling themselves citizens for a decent Atlanta, no less, and even inadvertently became fundraisers for the community and helped shove heterosexual people off the fence and into the streets to step in solidarity for all people's rights. Above all, LGBT people and old allies and new allies rallied together in the catastrophe of AIDS, evolving to a greater public profile and political clout at heartbreaking loss. So, here's the context for conversation. Conversations for possibilities. Jan, thank you for your introduction. And so you have some background about me, and as she was saying, I got started when I was a college student at George Washington University in Washington, DC, and that was from 1967 to 1971. And at the time, it's funny to me that I have to explain this to people, but I'm glad in a way I do, because people do not understand how you were closeted and people didn't know, and that there was no internet, and there were no, here I was at a major urban downtown university, George Washington University, and there was nothing LGBTQ. There was no student group. So it was really hard to come out. And finally, I just, without going into too much personal conversation, I decided I simply could not, live the way I was living any longer. And I needed to know other gay people. And so I called Frank Kameny. And if you don't know who he is, I definitely want people to know who he is. He really is the architect of our movement. He's also passed away. But this was in May of 1969. And I knew that there was such a thing as the Mattachine Society. So I called the Mattachine Society in Washington, D.C., and he answered the phone, and I said, well, I'm homosexual and I feel very bad about it. And he said, why do you feel bad about it? And I remember what a moment that was, what a transformative moment that was. It's like, oh, why do I feel bad about it? I don't need to feel bad about it. That was extraordinary to me. So I ended up getting involved with Frank Kameny and the Mattachine Society. And then thankfully, this was right after Stonewall. The biggest thing I want to say in terms of the effect of Stonewall was that it created all these different organizations. And so as a result of the Stonewall riots, gay liberation fronts were created all over the country. And finally, we organized one was organized in Washington, D.C. And this is, I recall, by January of 1970. So my second 2 years of college were totally different. My first 2 years of college, and I was involved with the Washington, D.C. Gay Liberation Front, and all of a sudden that was really my opening to be a gay activist. And then I also am really proud that I worked for Frank Kameny in 1971, who was the first openly gay man to run for Congress. And he did not win for the House seat from the District of Columbia, but I was just really happy and proud to do that, to work for him. Then after graduating from GW, I came here to Atlanta in October of '71, so that's 50 years now, and I've been involved ever since. When we talk about, again, it's like sort of total time machine. And at the time, my theme has been bringing the Bible Belt out of bondage, because we definitely had to contend with the churches, and especially when AIDS hit, we had to deal with people saying AIDS is God's judgment against homosexuals. So it was a totally different kind of time, and one of the things that I've talked about is that in 1971, when they had the very first Atlanta Pride March, the city, too busy to hate, refused to grant them a permit. It said they had to march on the sidewalk and stop every traffic light, because also the police were really hounding them, and they were going to arrest them for jaywalking if they did not stop for every traffic light. So they did that, and then I want to give props to Burl Boykin, who's also passed away, who was one of the Grand Marshals, the Grand Marshal, actually, and said that there were 125 people. I know I counted them twice, whereas the AJC reported 50 people. So they marched on the sidewalks, stopped for every traffic light, had 125 people, had a big rally in Piedmont Park, and then everything kind of went on from there. So let's see. One of the things I do want to point out too is that they went to the Georgia chapter of the ACLU, the Georgia Gay Liberation Front, Burl Boykin, Bill Smith, Steve Abbott, all these folks, and said, well, would you help us get a permit? And the Georgia chapter of the ACLU told them, no, we will not have to get a permit, you are not a minority. So what I try to do is say the glass is half full, and we can look and see how far we've come, that we have come such a long way, when certainly that's not anything that would be set a thought now. And then also what I wanted to talk about that's important historically, again, a sign of the times, is that Burl Boykin and Bill Smith and Klaus Smith, who was also an organizer in the Georgia Gay Liberation Front, met with then Governor Jimmy Carter on July 14th, 1971, and went to see him, and it was Governor Carter at the time had public meetings, so they just had to make an appointment, but he didn't necessarily know what they were coming to talk about, and was not happy. President Carter was not happy that they were coming to advocate for LGBTQ rights and to abolish the sodomy statute. And Burl told a wonderful story about asking Governor Carter if he would support these different things, and that he kept saying no, no, no. And then eventually they were escorted out of the office. And the good thing about that now is that, of course, President Carter is an ally of us now. And one of the things I wanted to say personally is that Burl Boykin and I helped start the Touching Up Our Roots, Georgia's LGBTQ Story Project. And in 2004, he and I, this is something you have to do as an activist, by the way. He and I basically went to the Carter Center and camped out in the lobby until someone would come see us. And we did get a representative from Carter staff to come see us. And at the time, and again, it's just sort of extraordinary, in 2004, an amendment was passed to the Georgia State Constitution that outlawed same-sex unions, let alone marriage. So we went to Governor Carter and President Carter and said, would you come out in favor of same-sex unions? And lo and behold, it took, several more months, but we finally did hear that, President Carter was on record as being in favor of same-sex civil unions. So, again, it's sort of, things change, tempus fugit and that kind of thing. Let's see. I wanted to also say that we are doing an online virtual version of our LGBTQ story tour. And there's a hashtag tour for it. And also you can look at our site, www.touchingupourroots.org. And then there's so many things that we don't have the time, obviously, to talk about all the different changes over the decades. But just the fact that we have come such a long way, as I was saying in my introduction. Touching Up Our Roots is Georgia's LGBTQ story project. celebrating the contributions LGBTQ Georgians make to expanding civil rights for all people, creating civic and neighborhood organizations, excuse me, and enhancing local, regional, and national culture. So it's the 4 Cs, celebrating contributions to civil rights, civics, and culture. So thank you very much. Thanks for the time.
Thank you, Dave, for that illuminating account of your time as a activist, a gay activist, particularly in Atlanta. It's very thought-provoking. Can I say something just real quick? I wanted to mention this thing I'm wearing on my head. I went to the groomer yesterday, and she has been grooming my dog for free for the past 3 weeks because the dog almost died and had lost a whole lot of hair. So she's just been very nice, and she was wearing something like this. And I was thinking in my head, man, I would love to wear something like that tomorrow when I film this thing. But I wonder if I could get one sent to me overnight. And then I thought, no, that's stupid. But so I asked her where she got it because I thought I could get one for future use. And she said, well, my mom made it. And I said, well, it's just beautiful. And she said, well, I've got another one. And she took this out of the drawer and she said, take it. And I was like, are you serious? She said, yes, please. I would love for you to have it. And I just wanted to mention that because there are just so many wonderful people in this world. If we just find the beauty in them, and there are so much out there, and I think it's so much out there than anything else. So I just had to mention my beautiful bandana. Anyway, I'd like to end with an excerpt from an opinion piece that was written by L.Z. Granderson, whose main background was actually in sports writing and broadcasting, and he is currently the Los Angeles Times sports and culture columnist. He wrote this piece for CNN back in 2013 with the title, How Come There's No Straight Pride Month? If you're a black person who gets offended whenever the civil rights movement is mentioned in the same sentence as the fight for gay rights, remember that Reverend Martin Luther King Jr.'s close confidant and most influential mentor was an openly gay black man by the name of Bayard Rustin. And if you ever find yourself wondering, how come there's no straight Pride Month? I say the day being straight becomes a crime, as being gay still is in many parts of the world. Start one. Gay pride was not born out of a need to celebrate not being straight, but our right to exist without prosecution. Why isn't there straight pride? Because Congress has yet to pass a law requiring people to hide the fact that they're straight. Because the streets are not filled with children who have been kicked out of their homes for being straight. Because there seems to be a lack of stories in which someone has been beaten, tied to a fence and left to die, or shot in the face at point-blank range because they were straight. So maybe instead of wondering why there isn't a straight Pride Month or movement, straight people should be thankful they don't need one. Dave will be attending our After COL Zoom meeting to answer questions and listen to your comments, so please join us immediately following this celebration of life, and you will find the Zoom link in the chat section of this broadcast. And please join us next week on October 17th, when the wonderful and always thought-provoking Anthony Knight will be our speaker. The title of his speech is, This Is Not Who We Are, Thoughts on Living Up to Who We Are as Humans. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on Zoom. Bye-bye.